You cannot heal what you keep calling nothing. That is where this message must begin. Not with blame, not with bitterness, not with an accusation against the woman who gave you life, raised you, fed you, disciplined you, prayed for you, or failed you in ways you still do not know how to name. This is not a message asking you to hate your mother. It is a message asking you to stop hating yourself for being hurt by her. Because for many women, the wound is not only what happened, the wound is the guilt that came afterward. The guilt of admitting my mother loved me, but she also wounded me. The guilt of saying she did her best, but her best still left something broken in me. The guilt of feeling pain towards someone you were taught to honor. Beloved, truth is not dishonor. Truth is where healing begins. The original source speaks with painful honesty about this. You may never heal until you face the truth about your mother, not to shame her, not to erase the good, but to stop pretending that what hurt you did not hurt simply because it came through someone you were supposed to love. And that truth may shake something inside you, because many daughters learned early that protecting their mother's image mattered more than protecting their own inner world. You learned to explain her before you understood yourself. She was tired. She had a hard life. She did not know better. She gave me a roof. She sacrificed. She prayed. She stayed. And maybe all of that is true. But there may be another truth standing quietly beside it. You were lonely. You were afraid. You were unheard. You had to become strong too early. You learned to read moods before you learned to trust your own feelings. You carried emotions that were too heavy for a child. You learned that love sometimes meant silence, performance, obedience, or disappearing. Beloved, both truths can stand in the same room. Your mother may have suffered, and you may have suffered because of her unhealed pain. She may have loved you and still not known how to listen to you. She may have provided for you and still not known how to comfort you. She may have protected you from certain dangers and still made your heart feel unsafe. She may have carried burdens you never saw and still placed burdens on you that were never yours to carry. This is not contradiction. This is complexity. And maturity is learning to hold complexity without lying to yourself. Some of you had a mother who was physically present but emotionally far away. She was in the house, but not always available to your heart. You could ask for food, clothes, school fees, permission, but not always tenderness, not always understanding, not always a safe place to fall apart. You learned to become practical with your pain. You learned to need less. You learned to be fine before you even knew what fine meant. Some of you had a mother who loved loudly but listened rarely. She knew how to correct, instruct, warn, and sacrifice, but she did not always know how to ask, "What are you feeling?" You grew up surrounded by her presence, yet starving for emotional recognition. And now, as an adult, you may still feel strange when someone listens gently, because gentleness was not the language your nervous system grew up trusting. Some of you had a mother who needed you, not in the healthy way a parent receives love from a child, but in a way that made you responsible for her emotions. You became her comforter, her counselor, her peacekeeper, her emotional support. You learned to monitor her face, her tone, her silence. You learned that your peace depended on her mood. And now, even in adulthood, you may still feel guilty when you are happy and she is not. Beloved, you were not created to be your mother's savior. Only Christ can carry what a daughter was never meant to carry. That sentence may feel difficult because honor has often been taught without boundaries. But biblical honor is not self-erasure. Honor does not require you to call harm love. Honor does not require you to deny your story. Honor does not require you to keep bleeding silently so the family image remains untouched. You can honor your mother as human and still acknowledge that your heart was wounded. God is not asking you to lie in order to be righteous. He is inviting you into truth so you can become whole. And truth may begin with one quiet sentence. What happened to me mattered. Say it slowly. What happened to me mattered. Not because you want revenge, not because you want to destroy her, not because you are ungrateful, but because healing cannot grow in a place where your pain is constantly minimized. The little girl inside you needs someone to finally stand up for her. She needs the adult you to stop explaining away every bruise on her heart. She needs you to say, I see you, I believe you, you were not too sensitive, you were responding to something real. This is where God meets daughters with mother wounds, not in denial, but in compassion. He does not ask you to choose between love and truth. He teaches you how to love without abandoning truth. He teaches you how to grieve without becoming bitter. He teaches you how to remember without being ruled. He teaches you how to honor without disappearing. Maybe your mother was wounded before she ever held you. Maybe she inherited silence, fear, shame, control, poverty, abandonment, religion without tenderness, survival without rest. Maybe she passed down what she never had the language to heal. That context can help you understand her, but it must not become a cage that keeps you from understanding yourself. Context explains, it does not erase. So tonight, beloved, let the first door open, not the door of accusation, the door of honesty. Let God sit with you in the place you have been afraid to name. Let him hold the complicated love, the hidden grief, the anger you were afraid would make you cruel, the guilt that rises when you choose yourself, and the longing for a mother who could have held you differently. You are not wrong for wanting tenderness. You are not wrong for needing safety. You are not wrong for telling the truth. And you are not dishonoring your mother by finally allowing God to heal her daughter. The original source says your mother had a life before you, a life that shaped how she loved, how she feared, how she reacted, how she protected, and how she failed. And beloved, this is one of the hardest truths for a wounded daughter to hold. Your mother was human before she was your mother. That sentence may feel dangerous at first. It may sound like an excuse. It may feel like someone is asking you to put your pain down before you are ready. But that is not what truth is asking of you. Truth is not asking you to erase what happened. Truth is asking you to see the whole room, not just the corner where your wound lives. Your mother was once a little girl too. Before she became the person who raised you, she was shaped by voices, fears, disappointments, family patterns, cultural expectations, religious pressure, poverty, silence, rejection, abandonment, or responsibilities she never had the chance to name. She may have learned love from people who confuse control with care. She may have learned womanhood as endurance. She may have been taught that tears were weakness, rest was laziness, obedience was survival, and tenderness was something you give but do not expect to receive. Then one day, she became a mother, and everyone expected her to know how, But motherhood does not magically heal a woman's unhealed wounds. Giving birth does not automatically give a woman emotional maturity. Providing food does not always mean she knows how to provide safety. Keeping a home together does not mean she knows how to hold a child's heart with gentleness. Some mothers did the best they could with the tools they had, but beloved, sometimes the tools were broken, and broken tools can still leave marks. This is where many daughters become confused. They think understanding their mother means they must stop telling the truth about themselves. They think compassion for her story requires denial of their own. But that is not healing. That is another form of disappearance. You can understand her pain and still acknowledge yours. You can have compassion for what shaped her and still admit what harmed you. You can say, she carried a lot, and also say, I carried things a child should not have carried. Those truths are not enemies. They are both part of the story. Ask yourself gently, have I been using my mother's suffering to silence my own? Have I been so busy explaining why she was the way she was that I never gave myself permission to say how it affected me? Have I mistaken compassion for self-abandonment? Beloved, context is important, but context is not permission for harm to remain unnamed. If your mother was emotionally unavailable because no one ever taught her emotional language, that may explain something, but it does not erase the loneliness you felt. If she was harsh because life was harsh to her, that may reveal something, but it does not erase the fear that grew inside you. If she sacrificed deeply but could not listen gently, both realities must be allowed to exist. Healing requires enough honesty to stop choosing one truth at the expense of another. In many families, daughters are taught to protect the mother's image at all costs. Do not speak too clearly. Do not remember too accurately. Do not make the family uncomfortable. Do not say, she hurt you. Do not ask why you were not comforted. Do not admit that her silence, anger, criticism, control, or emotional need shaped the way you now move through the world. But silence does not make the wound holy. It only makes the wounded person lonely. God is not afraid of family truth. He does not need you to pretend your childhood was softer than it was. He does not need you to polish the story before bringing it to him. He is not honored by emotional dishonesty. The Lord who sees the sparrow fall also saw the little girl who learned to hide her tears. He saw the daughter who became responsible too soon. He saw the child who wanted warmth but received correction. He saw the young woman who kept saying, it is fine, because telling the truth felt like betrayal. Beloved, God saw both of you. He saw your mother's wounds, and he saw yours. That is why healing must be rooted in truth, not blame. Blame often wants someone to punish. Truth wants something to be healed. Blame says, you destroyed me. Truth says, this shaped me, but it will not own me. Blame keeps the wound tied to revenge. Truth brings the wound into the light so God can begin to restore what was fractured. Some of you are carrying inherited pain. You did not begin the pattern, but you have been living inside it. Emotional distance passed from grandmother to mother to daughter. Fear passed down like a family recipe. Control disguised as protection. Shame disguised as discipline. Silence disguised as respect. Overgiving disguised as love. And now God is inviting you to become the woman in the bloodline who finally stops and says, this may have come through my family, but it will not continue through me. That is holy courage. But to break a pattern, you must first name it. You cannot heal what you keep romanticizing. You cannot release what you refuse to recognize. You cannot stop repeating what you are too loyal to question. And you cannot become whole while still calling your deepest wounds not that bad. Maybe she did not mean to hurt you, but you were hurt. Maybe she had no model for tenderness, but you still needed tenderness. Maybe she was surviving, but you were a child. Let that truth breathe. Not to condemn her, not to harden your heart, not to erase the good, but to finally allow the child inside you to stop carrying adult explanations as a substitute for comfort. Beloved, compassion for your mother must not require cruelty toward yourself. You can pray for her. You can honor what was good. You can recognize what she endured. You can thank God for the ways He used her life to bring you into the world. And still, you can bring your wound to Christ and say, Lord, this part of me still aches. That prayer is not rebellion. It is the beginning of freedom. The original source says you may never heal if you keep waiting for an apology that may never come. And beloved, that sentence may feel like a door closing before your heart was ready. Because deep inside, many daughters are still waiting for one sacred moment, the moment their mother finally sees clearly, finally understands fully, finally says the words their soul has been aching to hear. I am sorry. I did not know how much that hurt you. I should have listened. I should have protected you. I loved you, but I failed you there. For some of you, those words would feel like rain after a long drought. You have imagined the conversation. You have rehearsed your part in silence. You have wondered what you would say if she finally asked, "What did I do that wounded you?" You have carried the hope that one day the truth would open her heart and the wall between you would soften. And maybe, by God's grace, that conversation will happen. But beloved, your healing cannot depend on it. Because if your freedom requires another person to become honest, humble, emotionally mature, and ready at the exact moment you need them to be, then your future remains chained to someone else's capacity. And some mothers may never have the language to admit what happened. Some may be too ashamed. Some may be too defended. Some may see your truth as an attack because they have never learned how to face pain without feeling destroyed by it. That does not make your pain less real. It only means you may have to heal without the apology you deserved. Ask yourself gently, have I been postponing my healing because I am waiting for my mother to validate my wound? Have I made her acknowledgement the key to a door God is already inviting me to open? What part of me still believes I cannot be free until she understands? Beloved, closure is not always a conversation. Sometimes closure is a holy decision made in the presence of God. It is the moment you say, Lord, I release my demand that she must understand before I can begin to live. It is the moment you stop returning to the same locked door, hoping this time it will open. It is the moment you realize that Christ can enter rooms your mother never knew how to enter. There is grief in that. Do not rush past it. It is painful to accept that someone who shaped your heart may never fully understand how they shaped your hurt. It is painful to realize that the apology you needed may not come in the language your heart has been waiting for. It is painful to stop hoping someone will become who you needed them to be. But sometimes hope must change form. You may stop hoping she will suddenly become tender in the way you imagined, and begin hoping that God will make you whole even if she never changes. You may stop hoping she will explain your pain back to you and begin trusting that God already knows every detail. You may stop hoping she will bless your boundaries and begin believing that obedience to truth does not require her permission. Beloved, healing does not need her signature. Your peace does not need her approval. Your story does not become valid only when she agrees with it. There are daughters who keep returning to the wound because they believe if they can just explain it better, softer, longer, more respectfully, more carefully, then maybe their mother will finally understand. So they try again. They choose the right moment. They lower their voice. They add gratitude. They say, "I know you did your best," before they dare mention the hurt. They protect her feelings even while trying to reveal their own. And still, they are dismissed. You are too sensitive. That never happened. I did everything for you. You only remember the bad. After all I sacrificed, those words can wound a second time. The first wound happened in the past. The second wound happens when your pain is denied in the present. And beloved, if every attempt to be heard leaves you bleeding again, wisdom may ask you to stop presenting your heart to a place that keeps mishandling it. That does not mean you stop loving. It means you stop begging to be understood by someone who refuses to listen. It means you bring the unfinished conversation to God. It means you allow Him to mother the places that were left unattended. It means you stop handing your healing to the person who may still be unable to face her own unhealed story. Jesus understands what it means to be unseen by those closest to Him. He understands rejection, misunderstanding, silence, accusation, and abandonment. He knows how to hold a heart that has not been properly held. He knows how to speak identity over the places where another voice spoke shame. He knows how to restore the dignity of a daughter who learned to apologize for having needs. So when the apology does not come, go to Him. Tell Him the words you wish she had said. Tell Him the ache of still wanting her tenderness. Tell Him the anger you feel ashamed to admit. Tell Him the exhaustion of being the mature one, the understanding one, the forgiving one, the one who keeps making room for her humanity while wondering who will make room for yours. He will not shame you. He will not tell you to hurry. He will not ask you to pretend. He will help you grieve honestly. And grief is different from bitterness. Bitterness says, "I will keep this pain alive so it can keep me safe." Grief says, "I will finally admit what I lost so God can teach me how to live beyond it." Bitterness hardens. Grief softens. Bitterness chains you to the wound. Grief releases what was never in your control. Beloved, you may have to grieve the mother you needed, not just the mother you had. You may have to grieve the tenderness that never came, the protection that was inconsistent, the comfort that felt conditional, the apology that remains unspoken. And as you grieve, you may discover something holy. The absence of her apology does not mean the absence of God's healing. God can restore without her agreement. God can comfort without her confession. God can free you without her participation. So release the chain, slowly, if you must. Release the belief that your life cannot move until she understands. Release the exhausting labor of trying to make someone face what they are not ready to face. Release the courtroom in your mind where you keep presenting evidence to an absent judge. Your healing begins when you stop waiting for permission to be whole. The original source says the image of your mother you have been protecting may be costing you your life. Because some daughters defend their mothers so fiercely that there is no room left for their own story. And beloved, this is where healing becomes painful in a different way, not because you hate your mother, but because you finally realize how much of yourself you have buried to keep her image untouched. You may have learned to defend her before you ever learned to defend yourself. She was tired. She had no help. She sacrificed everything. She did not mean it. She came from a hard life. She did the best she could. And maybe every sentence is true. But beloved, truth must not be used as a blanket to cover another truth. Yes, she may have done her best, but you may still have been hurt. Yes, she may have provided, but you may still have felt emotionally hungry. Yes, she may have prayed for you, but you may still have longed for tenderness. Yes, she may have suffered, but you were still a child. A child should not have to erase her own pain to protect an adult's story. Ask yourself gently, do I defend my mother faster than I acknowledge myself? Do I feel guilty when I tell the truth about what happened? Have I confused loyalty with silence, honor with self-erasure, and love with the refusal to name harm? For many daughters, the mother wound is not only about what the mother did or did not do. It is about the role the daughter learned to play. The good daughter, the strong daughter, the understanding daughter, the one who never complains, the one who keeps the peace, the one who protects the family name, the one who makes excuses, the one who swallows sadness and calls it maturity. But peace that requires your disappearance is not peace. It is emotional survival. Maybe you became the daughter who learned to anticipate moods. You could tell by the sound of a footstep, the tone of a sigh, the silence at the table, whether it was safe to speak. Maybe you learned to bring home achievements, not emotions. Maybe you learned that being impressive earned more approval than being honest. Maybe you became useful because being needy felt dangerous. And now, as an adult, you may wonder why love feels like labor, why you over-explain, why you overgive, why you overstay, why rest feels selfish, why boundaries feel like betrayal, why someone else's disappointment feels like danger. Beloved, those patterns did not begin with you being too much. They often began with you learning that your needs complicated the room. So you made yourself smaller. You became easier to manage. You became emotionally low maintenance. You learned to survive by becoming less honest. But God is not calling you to remain small so everyone else can remain comfortable. There is a little girl inside you who still needs you to stand up and say, "What happened to me mattered." Not with hatred, not with revenge, not with cruelty, but with the holy firmness of a woman who is no longer willing to abandon the child she once was. That little girl may have been praised for being strong, but strength was never supposed to replace comfort. She may have been called mature, but maturity was never supposed to mean carrying adult emotions. She may have been told to understand, but understanding was never supposed to require silence about pain. Beloved, grief is part of this healing. You may need to grieve the mother you needed, not only the mother you had. That grief can feel strange because the person may still be alive. She may still call. She may still exist in your life. There may still be moments of laughter, memory, obligation, tenderness, even love. And yet, you are grieving what was missing. You are grieving comfort that never came, protection that was inconsistent, safety that felt conditional, affection that depended on performance, conversations that never had room for your heart. Grief does not mean ingratitude. Grief means you are finally letting truth breathe. Some daughters are terrified of anger. They fear that if they admit anger toward their mother, they will become dishonoring, cruel, or bitter. But anger is not always sin. Sometimes anger is the part of your soul that still knows something sacred was crossed. Anger can point to the boundary that should have existed. It can reveal the need that was ignored. It can show you where love became confused with control, fear, silence, or emotional labor. Suppressed anger becomes poison. Honest anger, surrendered to God, can become clarity. Bring it to Him. Do not let it rule you, but do not pretend it is not there. Pray with honesty. Lord, I am angry. I am hurt. I do not want bitterness to own me, but I also do not want to lie anymore. God can handle that prayer. He is not threatened by your honesty. He already knew the wound before you had the courage to name it. This is where boundaries become holy. You can love your mother and still stop carrying responsibility for her happiness. You can honor her and still refuse emotional manipulation. You can speak respectfully and still say no. You can forgive and still keep distance. You can be compassionate toward her story and still protect your own healing. Honor does not mean unlimited access. It means you choose righteousness in how you respond, while refusing to return to patterns that keep wounding your soul. Beloved, you are allowed to be a daughter without becoming a sacrifice. You are allowed to have a life that is not organized around keeping someone else emotionally stable. You are allowed to stop being the translator, the fixer, the comforter, the one who absorbs every storm so the family can pretend the weather is fine. Christ carried the cross so you would not spend your whole life crucifying yourself for other people's comfort. Let that truth enter slowly. You can love her and still outgrow the role you played in her pain. You can honor her and still stop repeating the family pattern. You can pray for her and still protect your peace. You can understand her humanity and still refuse to let her unhealed places define your future. This is not betrayal. This is the beginning of becoming whole. The original source says forgiveness is not forgetting, and reconciliation is not required. And beloved, that truth may feel like water to a soul that has been told for years that healing means pretending nothing happened, returning to the same patterns, smiling through the same wounds, and calling silence peace. Forgiveness has often been misunderstood, especially by daughters with mother wounds. Some were taught that to forgive means to erase the story. Some were told forgiveness means never speaking of the pain again. Some were pressured to reconcile quickly because she is your mother, as though the title alone cancels the need for safety, repentance, honesty, and change. But forgiveness is not denial. Forgiveness is not spiritual amnesia. Forgiveness is not allowing someone continued access to wound you in the same place God is trying to heal. You can forgive and still say no. You can forgive and still need distance. You can forgive and still tell the truth. You can forgive and still grieve. You can forgive and still decide that certain conversations are no longer safe. Certain visits must be limited. Certain topics are not open, and certain patterns will not continue through you. Beloved, forgiveness is between your soul and God. Reconciliation requires two people. That distinction matters deeply. Forgiveness can begin in the hidden place of prayer, where you bring the poison, the resentment, the ache, the disappointment, and the unfinished questions to God. Reconciliation, however, requires humility, accountability, changed behavior, emotional safety, and a willingness from both sides to walk in truth. If those things are absent, you can release bitterness without reopening the door to harm. This is not rebellion. This is wisdom. Ask yourself gently, have I been forcing myself to reconcile because I thought forgiveness required access? Have I been calling repeated exposure honor? Have I allowed guilt to push me back into places where my soul is not safe? Many daughters are afraid to set boundaries with their mothers because the guilt feels unbearable. The moment they say no, an old voice rises. You are selfish. You are ungrateful. After everything she did for you, a good daughter would not act this way. That guilt can feel so strong that you may mistake it for God. But not every guilt is conviction. Conviction leads you toward truth, humility, and love. False guilt drags you back into self-abandonment. Conviction helps you repent where you have sinned. False guilt tells you to surrender your boundaries so other people do not have to face their behavior. Conviction brings peace after obedience. False guilt creates panic until you return to the old pattern. Learn the difference. Because when you begin healing from a mother wound, guilt may show up every time you choose yourself. It may appear when you rest instead of rushing to fix her emotions. It may appear when you stop answering every call immediately. It may appear when you speak honestly. It may appear when you no longer allow criticism to enter your heart unchallenged. It may appear when you stop managing the family's comfort at the expense of your own truth. That guilt does not mean you are wrong. Sometimes it means you are doing something new. Beloved, forgiveness also does not mean your anger was sinful. Anger can become dangerous when it turns into hatred, revenge, cruelty, or bitterness. But anger itself can be a signal. It can reveal where your dignity was violated. It can point toward a boundary that should have been protected. It can show you where you were taught to accept too little, carry too much, or silence yourself too often. Do not build a home inside anger, but do not ignore what it is trying to show you. Bring it to Christ before it hardens. Let him translate it into clarity. Let him show you what needs to be released, what needs to be grieved, and what needs to be protected going forward. The goal is not to become a daughter full of rage. The goal is to become a daughter full of truth, peace, and wisdom. Some of you may not be ready to forgive yet. Even reading that word may make your body tense. You may feel like forgiveness is being demanded before anyone has acknowledged the damage. Beloved, God is gentle with wounded hearts. Healing is not a race. The Lord does not heal by forcing you to skip over grief. He walks with you through it. Start with honesty. Lord, I am not ready. Lord, I want forgiveness, but I am still angry. Lord, I do not know how to release this without feeling like I am saying it was acceptable. Lord, teach me what forgiveness really means. That prayer is a beginning. God can work with truth. He cannot heal the version of you that keeps pretending. But when you bring him the raw places, the complicated emotions, the love mixed with pain, the gratitude mixed with grief, the longing mixed with disappointment, he begins to separate what has been tangled for years. He may show you that forgiveness is not letting your mother off the hook. It is taking your heart off the hook. It is refusing to let the wound control every relationship, every decision, every reaction, every fear. It is allowing God to become judge so you do not have to spend your whole life holding court inside your own chest. And beloved, forgiving does not mean forgetting the lesson. Wisdom remembers without hatred. Wisdom says, I will not use this wound to punish myself or others, but I will also not pretend I learned nothing. You can become softer and wiser at the same time. You can release bitterness and keep boundaries. You can pray for your mother and still protect your peace. That is maturity. That is healing. That is grace with discernment. One day, forgiveness may feel less like a command and more like freedom. Not freedom that excuses what happened, but freedom that says, this will no longer be the center of my life. The past may still be part of your story, but it will not be the hand around your throat. The memory may still exist, but it will not rule your breathing. Her voice may still echo sometimes, but it will no longer be the final authority over who you are. God's voice will become louder, and where his voice becomes louder, healing begins to breathe. The original source says some daughters are healing in rooms where their mother's voice still echoes, when they rest, when they succeed, when they fail, when they try to choose a life that no longer fits the old story. And beloved, this is where the wound often becomes invisible to everyone else, because the voice may no longer be speaking from outside you. It may now be speaking from within. You hear it when you are tired. Why are you resting? You should be doing more. Do not be selfish. Do not disappoint people. Do not be too much. Do not make trouble. Do not speak that way. Do not need so much. Sometimes the voice is not even a sentence. It is a feeling. A tightness in your chest when you say no. A wave of guilt when you choose peace. A fear that rises when someone is displeased with you. A shame that appears when you are not productive, useful, pleasant, or emotionally available. You may not even realize you are still living under an old voice until you try to become free. Beloved, healing requires learning how to answer back, not with hatred, not with disrespect, not with the bitterness that keeps you chained to the same wound, but with truth, with spiritual authority, with the voice of a daughter who has finally realized that the words spoken over her were not always the words God spoke about her. Some of you were told you were too sensitive, but perhaps you were simply perceptive in a home that punished honesty. Some of you were told you were difficult, but perhaps you were a child with needs that overwhelmed an emotionally unavailable adult. Some of you were told you were ungrateful, but perhaps you were trying to say, I appreciate what was given, but I am still aching for what was missing. Some of you were told you were dramatic, but perhaps your body was carrying truth your family refused to name. Those labels were not prophecies. They were projections, and projections lose power when truth begins to speak. Ask yourself gently, what sentence about myself did I inherit from my mother's pain? What belief have I carried as if it came from God, when it may have come from fear, control, shame, or survival? What old voice still shapes the way I see myself? This is holy work. It is not quick. It is not always comfortable. Because when you begin to separate your mother's voice from God's voice, you may grieve how long you lived beneath words that were never meant to define you. You may grieve the years you called yourself too much, the years you apologized for being tender, the years you made yourself small to avoid criticism, the years you thought love had to be earned through usefulness, silence, or sacrifice. But grief can become a doorway. Behind it, there is a new language waiting. The language of God says, "You are fearfully and wonderfully made." The language of God says, "Come to me when you are weary." The language of God says, "Your life is not a burden to me." The language of God says, "I do not despise your tears." The language of God says, "I formed you with tenderness, purpose, and dignity." Beloved, you must let his voice become louder than the voice that wounded you. This does not mean you dishonor your mother. It means you stop allowing her unhealed places to become the final authority over your identity. You can love her and still outgrow the story she told you about yourself. You can honor her and still say, "That label does not belong to me." You can pray for her and still refuse to let her fear govern your future. Some daughters are learning late in life how to mother themselves. That phrase may sound strange, but it is sacred. To mother yourself is to give tenderness to the places that were met with criticism. To mother yourself is to ask, "What do I need?" without immediately calling the need selfish. To mother yourself is to rest when your body is tired, to speak gently when shame becomes loud, to protect the younger you who learned to accept too little, to become the safe place you once needed. This is not replacing God. This is cooperating with his healing. Because God often teaches you to care for yourself the way you should have been cared for. He teaches you to comfort your own heart with truth. He teaches you to notice when you are abandoning yourself. He teaches you to pause before you repeat the same harsh tone you inherited. He teaches you to say, "No, I will not speak to myself that way anymore." There is power in that sentence. I will not speak to myself that way anymore. When you fail, you do not need to beat yourself into growth. When you rest, you do not need to explain your exhaustion to the inner critic. When you feel deeply, you do not need to call yourself weak. When you need support, you do not need to shame yourself for being human. When you set a boundary, you do not need to return to old guilt as if guilt is proof of love. Beloved, guilt often rises when you stop abandoning yourself. That does not mean you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it means you are doing something new. A woman who has been trained to disappear will feel strange when she begins to take up space. A daughter who learned to manage everyone else's emotions will feel selfish when she begins to honor her own. But discomfort is not always conviction. Sometimes it is the sound of an old pattern losing control. Let it lose control. Let God teach you a new way to live. You are allowed to feel what you feel. You are allowed to name what happened. You are allowed to choose what happens next. You are allowed to become a woman whose life is not ruled by old fear, old guilt, old labels, or old family scripts. You are allowed to let the voice of Christ rewrite the sentences that pain wrote inside you. And one day, you will notice something quiet but powerful. The old voice may still echo sometimes, but it will no longer command you. The guilt may still visit, but it will no longer rule. The memory may still ache, but it will no longer define your worth. You will have learned to answer back with truth, not the truth of bitterness, the truth of freedom. The original source says healing begins when truth is no longer negotiable, when pretending becomes heavier than pain, and silence begins to suffocate more than the memory itself. And beloved, this is the turning point in the healing of a daughter, the moment she stops bargaining with what she knows. For years, you may have softened the truth so it would not disturb the room. You may have edited your memories so they would sound less painful. You may have wrapped your hurt in gratitude before anyone could accuse you of being unthankful. You may have said, "It was not that bad," while your body remembered the fear, the loneliness, the criticism, the silence, the pressure, the emotional weight you were never meant to carry. But the body keeps record. The soul remembers what the mouth refuses to say. And one day, the truth rises, not to destroy you, to free you. Beloved, truth is not cruelty. Truth is not rebellion. Truth is not dishonor. Truth is the ground healing needs in order to stand. You cannot heal in a life built on denial. You cannot become whole while constantly negotiating with reality. You cannot keep telling yourself it did not matter when the wound has shaped the way you love, trust, speak, rest, choose, and see yourself. Ask yourself gently, what truth have I been afraid to name? What memory have I minimized because naming it would change the way I see my story? What part of me has been waiting for permission to admit, yes, that hurt me? This does not mean you must tell everything to everyone. Truth does not require public exposure. Some truths are first spoken only to God. Some are written in a journal with trembling hands. Some are whispered in prayer through tears. Some are shared with one safe person who knows how to listen without turning your wound into gossip, judgment, or advice too quickly. But whether spoken loudly or quietly, truth must stop being negotiable inside you. You must stop explaining away what crossed the line. You must stop calling neglect personality. You must stop calling control protection. You must stop calling fear respect. You must stop calling emotional exhaustion honor. You must stop telling the child inside you that she should have needed less, felt less, asked less, cried less. She needed what children need: safety, tenderness, listening, protection, warmth, guidance without shame, correction without humiliation, love that did not require performance. If those things were missing, then something was missing. That truth does not cancel the good your mother did. It does not erase sacrifices. It does not deny the meals, the labor, the prayers, the sleepless nights, the ways she may have tried. But love and lack can coexist. Gratitude and grief can sit at the same table. You can say, I received some things, and still say, I needed more. Beloved, complexity is not betrayal. It is maturity. For many daughters, the fear of truth is really the fear of what truth will require. If you admit you were hurt, you may have to grieve. If you grieve, you may have to stop pretending you are fine. If you stop pretending, you may have to set boundaries. If you set boundaries, someone may be disappointed. If someone is disappointed, old guilt may rise. And if old guilt rises, you may be tempted to run back to the familiar prison of silence. Do not run back. Let God hold you there. Healing does not always feel peaceful at first. Sometimes it feels like trembling honesty. Sometimes it feels like grief finally having language. Sometimes it feels like anger that scares you because you have spent your life being praised for control. Sometimes it feels like confusion because the old story is breaking before the new one is fully formed. But that breaking can be holy. When truth becomes non-negotiable, boundaries become clearer. You no longer argue with yourself about what your spirit already knows. You no longer spend hours proving why you deserve respect. You no longer hand your pain to people who are committed to misunderstanding it. You begin to understand that peace is not the same as keeping everyone comfortable. Peace that costs your truth is too expensive. There are daughters who have kept family systems alive by staying silent. They learn to smile at gatherings, answer politely, avoid certain topics, keep the story clean, and carry the emotional weight privately. They became skilled at functioning while fragmented. But God does not heal you so you can keep functioning in pieces. He heals you so you can become whole. Wholeness may disrupt the room. Let it. Wholeness may disappoint people who benefited from your silence. Let it. Wholeness may require you to stop playing the role that kept the family comfortable but kept your soul exhausted. Let it. Beloved, you do not owe anyone a version of yourself that cost you your sanity. You do not owe silence in exchange for belonging. You do not owe endless access to people who dismiss your reality. You do not owe forgiveness before understanding. You do not owe reconciliation where there is no repentance, safety, or change. You owe God your honesty, and you owe the wounded places within you the dignity of no longer being denied. This is where your inner child begins to trust you. Every truthful boundary says to her, I am listening now. Every honest prayer says, you are no longer alone. Every moment you choose reality over denial repairs something ancient inside you. Your body begins to breathe differently when it learns you will not betray it again for false peace. One day, you will notice the shift. You are no longer rehearsing conversations with people who never listen. You are no longer shrinking your needs to fit into spaces that cannot hold you. You are no longer asking, how much of myself must I hide to stay loved? Instead, you begin asking, what kind of love requires me to disappear? And that question becomes freedom. Beloved, healing begins when truth becomes the ground under your feet, not a bargaining chip you keep handing away. Stand there. Even if your voice shakes, God will meet you in the truth. The original source says healing begins when your lived experience becomes valid inside you, even if it contradicts someone else's version of the story. And beloved, this is where the daughter finally becomes free. Not when everyone agrees, not when the past changes, not when every apology arrives, but when she stops abandoning the truth God has helped her see. You may have spent years trying to make your story acceptable, softer, smaller, more polite, less disruptive. You may have added gratitude before pain, excuses before honesty, compassion for your mother before compassion for yourself. You may have tried to tell the truth in a way that would not make anyone uncomfortable, only to discover that some people are uncomfortable with truth, no matter how gently it is spoken. But your healing cannot depend on everyone's comfort. There comes a moment when you must stand before God and say, Lord, this is what happened. This is what I felt. This is what I needed. This is what I carried. This is what I am ready to release. And this is the woman I am willing to become now. That prayer may not sound polished, but it is holy. Because God does not heal the version of you that keeps pretending. He heals the version of you that comes into the light. Not perfect, not composed, not free from trembling, just honest. Beloved, truth is not the end of love. Truth is the beginning of mature love. You can love your mother without lying about your wound. You can honor her humanity without sacrificing your own. You can see her pain without making it the reason you ignore yours. You can pray for her and still stop letting her unhealed places govern your life. This is wholeness. Wholeness does not require you to hate her. It does not require you to erase her. It does not require you to build your future around proving she was wrong. Wholeness simply means the wound no longer sits on the throne of your identity. It means her voice may still echo sometimes, but God's voice has become louder. It means the little girl inside you is no longer alone, because the woman you are now has finally come back for her. Ask yourself gently, what does the wounded child inside me still need to hear? What truth have I been afraid to believe because it would require me to change? What would my life look like if I stopped living from the injury and started living from God's restoration? Maybe she needs to hear, you were not too sensitive. Maybe she needs to hear, you deserve tenderness. Maybe she needs to hear, you were a child, and that burden was not yours. Maybe she needs to hear, you do not have to keep earning love by disappearing. Maybe she needs to hear, God saw you then, and God is healing you now. Say those words with reverence. Say them slowly. Let them reach the places that learn to survive without comfort. Let them become a new language inside you. Because part of healing from a mother wound is learning to mother yourself with the tenderness you once waited to receive. Not because you do not need God, you do. Not because community does not matter, it does. But because God often teaches you to participate in your own restoration. He teaches you how to speak kindly to your heart, how to rest without guilt, how to set boundaries without apology, how to grieve without shame, how to stop repeating the same harshness that wounded you. Beloved, do not become cruel to yourself in the voice of someone who could not love you well. Let that pattern end here. Let the criticism end here. Let the emotional self-abandonment end here. Let the guilt-driven obedience end here. Let the silence that kept everyone comfortable but kept you fragmented end here. You are allowed to become the woman who tells the truth and still walks in grace. You are allowed to forgive at the pace God leads, not the pace people pressure. You are allowed to keep distance where distance protects peace. You are allowed to love without access. You are allowed to honor without returning to harm. You are allowed to build a life that is not organized around managing your mother's emotions. And yes, there may be grief. There may be days when you still wish things had been different. Days when you see other daughters held tenderly and something inside you aches. Days when a simple word, a memory, a holiday, a silence, or a conversation brings the old longing back. Do not shame yourself for that. Grief may visit even after healing has begun, but grief is not proof that you are failing. It is proof that something mattered. Bring that grief to Christ. He knows what it is to love and be misunderstood. He knows what it is to be rejected by those who should have recognized him. He knows what it is to carry sorrow without becoming bitter. He knows how to hold the daughter who still longs for a mother's tenderness, even while she learns to receive the father's love more deeply. And through him, you can become free. free from waiting for an apology before living, free from calling pain loyalty, free from confusing guilt with conviction, free from repeating family patterns because no one before you knew how to name them, free from shrinking yourself to preserve a false peace. Beloved, this freedom may not come all at once. It may come in small acts of courage. One honest prayer, one boundary, one refusal to over-explain, one moment when you rest even though guilt rises, one decision to stop rehearsing the conversation that may never happen, one gentle sentence spoken to yourself when shame tries to return. These small moments are not small in the spirit. They are the bricks of a rebuilt life. One day, you will notice that you breathe differently. You will hear her voice in your mind and realize it no longer has the same authority. You will feel guilt rise and recognize it as an old reflex, not a command. You will remember what happened without becoming swallowed by it. You will love what can be loved, grieve what must be grieved, release what cannot be changed, and protect what God is still healing. That is not bitterness. That is wisdom. And perhaps one day your healing will become part of the healing of the generations after you. Perhaps the softness you reclaim will touch your children, your friendships, your marriage, your ministry, your community, your own inner world. Perhaps the truth you finally told will stop a pattern that silence kept alive for too long. Perhaps the daughter who was wounded will become the woman who breaks the chain, not by hatred, by honesty, not by revenge, by restoration, not by denying her mother's humanity, by finally honoring her own. Beloved, you may never receive the mother you needed in the way you needed her, but you can still receive healing. You can still receive peace. You can still become whole. You can still let God mother the places left unattended, father the places left unprotected, and restore the identity that pain tried to rewrite. Your story does not end with what was missing. It continues with what God is rebuilding. So stand in truth, grieve with courage, forgive with wisdom, set boundaries with peace. Let God rewrite the old sentences. Let the little girl inside you finally feel believed. Let the woman you are becoming walk forward without asking the past for permission. You are not dishonoring your mother by healing. You are honoring the life God gave you.